Hi everyone, I'm Brian. I'm the field manager here at Seed Savers Exchange, and I'm really glad to be here tonight with you all, chatting about seed saving from peppers. Thank you all for joining us. So I will just talk briefly about growing and caring for peppers, and we can focus most of our time on the seed saving. The good news is that peppers grown for seed are grown pretty much just as you would grow the vegetable crop. You want to start your plants indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. It is important that you watch the weather closely at this time, as peppers are very tender and sensitive to frost damage. Don't forget to harden them off before moving them out into the real world. Here in northeast Iowa, with our short growing season, it would be nearly impossible to even get peppers to the point of flowering if we were to direct seed them into the garden. Once you are ready to put transplants into the garden, make sure that you bury the root balls completely and water them in nicely. Adding compost or a slow-release organic fertilizer at planting is a great idea to help promote early growth and good establishment. Peppers are heavy feeders, and especially since we are growing peppers for seed maturity, we know that we need to build a nice big plant and canopy that can support a mature pepper crop and protect it from sunburn and rot. Here at the farm, we like to side dress peppers with fish fertilizer around the time that they are just beginning to flower and set fruit. Another helpful tool is mulching. So after you have weeded your crop a couple of times and it is up and growing, this is a great time to put down some mulch. Mulching will help retain moisture, keep weeds down, and protect against some diseases. As far as mulches go, I would recommend straw or hay. For the home gardener, grass clippings are also a really good idea. When we use green material as mulch, it works double duty as a fertilizer, adding available nitrogen to our pepper plants. One more thing, as far as culture goes, more often than not, you will need to support or stake your pepper plants, especially when growing them to seed maturity. Mature plants will often get top-heavy with fruit and fall over. Plants and fruit lying on the ground are much more susceptible to disease and rot. Here on the screen, you can see the 5 most common domesticated pepper species. All are in the genus Capsicum, or generally speaking, they are all peppers. Capsicum annuum is the species that most of us will be dealing with most of the time. This group includes both sweet and hot peppers, such as bell peppers, jalapenos, and cayennes. Capsicum frutescens includes the Tabasco type peppers, and Capsicum chinense includes the habaneros. One of the more complicated things about peppers in general is that although we learn the taxonomy, it doesn't help us that much as seed savers. Just because one of your pepper varieties is a jalapeno or C. annum, and the other pepper in the row next to it is a habanero or C. chinense, doesn't mean that they won't cross. All peppers, regardless of which species they belong to, are cross-compatible to some degree. And so to be on the safe side and the simple side, we should just treat them all as one big sexually compatible group in order to maintain varietal purity. All peppers have perfect flowers and are mostly self-pollinated. We're talking about pollination and flowering now. Insects are not required for pollination. However, bees in particular are more than happy to visit pepper flowers and make crosses between different varieties, if we don't take proper measures. So because of potential crossing, we cannot expect to maintain varietal purity and grow successful seed in a community garden plot, for example, where every plot has a pepper growing in it. Similarly, we cannot successfully grow 2 peppers side by side in our own garden and expect the harvested seed to be pure. Since peppers are fully capable of outcrossing, isolation measures must be taken so that insects do not transfer pollen from one variety to the other in our gardens or from the pepper plants in our neighbor's garden. Before we go on, I want to remind everyone again that crossing between different species of peppers is not uncommon, and if absolute purity is desired, all pepper varieties should be isolated from one another regardless of the species. Generally speaking, 300 feet between varieties is pretty standard. You can safely cut this distance in half if you can plant a tall hedgerow or a barn in between the 2 varieties that you are trying to isolate, or a house or a tree line between your pepper crop and your neighbor's. A building or a tree line acts as a barrier, reducing the distances needed when isolating varieties. Another curveball is that because of differences in flower structure, hot peppers are more promiscuous and more likely to outcross than sweet peppers. So, if you are trying to isolate and save seed from two different sweet pepper varieties, 150 feet is all that is recommended, even without barriers. If there are barriers between the crop, you can safely reduce this distance to 75 feet. It is only when at least one of the varieties you are growing is a hot pepper variety that you must maintain the 300 feet isolation distance, or 150 feet if you have barriers between the two crops. Always remember, with everything, watch out for what your neighbor is growing when using isolation distances. So here in this slide, you can see the pepper cages here at Heritage Farm. We use cages quite a bit for pepper production. Caging in the case of peppers involves simply excluding insects from visiting a single variety of peppers. Remember, peppers don't require insects for pollination, so simply by excluding them, we can rest assured that the seed we harvest will be true to type. You don't necessarily need custom seed production cages for seed saving at home. For home gardeners, low tunnels with fabric row cover are known to work quite well. However, it is important that the tunnels are built tall enough for the plants to grow, and that the row cover is tightly secured. You should also inspect your row covered peppers daily to repair any rips or tears. And I should remind you as well that weeds still grow under row covers. One method for saving pepper seed is bagging individual flowers to prevent crossing. The photo here shows a bag around a cluster of tomato flowers. Peppers should be bagged in a similar fashion, except that peppers set flowers individually. So instead of bagging a cluster of flowers, you will bag single flowers individually. Flowers must still be closed for this method to be successful at the time that you are bagging. Do not bag flowers that have already opened. Once the fruit is set, the bag should be removed, and it is important to permanently mark the particular flower and fruit that you have bagged so that it can be identified upon harvest. It is important to bag fruit from as many plants as possible when using this method. I am not sure where the spun bags similar to the one in the photo were purchased, but you can cut a piece of fabric row cover to place and secure over the flower. Gardeners and seed savers are very intuitive people and will find many previously unused tools to aid them in tasks such as bagging techniques. As far as population sizes go, the best advice I can give for home gardeners is to always grow and save seed from as many plants as possible. If you are only able to grow 10 plants, make sure that you save seed from at least one fruit on every plant, and combine all of that seed before you regrow or share it with others. This will help to ensure that we are maintaining the genetic diversity within the population. The best indicator of seed maturity in peppers is when the fruit becomes uniformly ripe to its mature color. Most commonly this is red. However, it can be yellow, orange, or purple, or brown. And in a few cases can even be a darker green than the immature green of the immature fruit. A secondary indicator is seed color. Immature seeds are glossy and bright white. Mature seeds are more ivory and dull in color. Mature seed is also very hard compared to soft immature seed. Once you have harvested your mature fruit, it is time to extract the seed and clean and dry it. Extracting seed from large peppers is a very simple task. Carefully cut open the fruit without cutting into the central core of the pepper. Most of the seed is at the stem or top end of the pepper. With bell or ancho type peppers, for example, it is easy to remove most of the flesh and simply rub the seed from the core with your fingers onto a dish. This is also good because you can eat the flesh that you've removed. If the seed is relatively clean at this point, there is little need to process it any further. Simply allow the seeds to further dry for a couple of days. And if there's any pulp or fruit fragments in there, you can remove those as well. Small and hot peppers may be processed in a similar fashion as well, if you have the patience. However, a better method for processing a large batch of very small peppers is to remove the stems and macerate all of the fruit in a food processor or blender on a very low speed. Cover the peppers with water before blending and blend until all of the seed is free from the fruit and pulp. Once all of the seed is free, transfer all of the contents to a large container such as a bucket. Add more water to the mixture. Stir and agitate it a bit to free up any more seed that's hung up in the fruit or pulp. Good seed will sink to the bottom of the bucket, and light seed and pulp can be poured right off the top. Once you have repeated this process by adding more water and pouring off the floating material, you should end up with clear water with good seed resting on the bottom. Pour this seed into a strainer or sieve, pat it dry, and place the seed on a dish or cloth to further dry. And this is a very important point here. Hot peppers should be processed in a well-ventilated area, and gloves should be worn. Be very careful. Even after you wash your hands a couple of times, rubbing your eyes can be very painful. So once you have extracted your seed by whichever method, it will need to be dried down further. This usually takes about 2 to 3 days before your seed is ready to be put away. Dry the seed indoors out of direct sunlight. It is important that pepper seed is dried down quickly. A very light breeze from a fan will help with this process. This is especially true if you have rinsed or floated off pulp and light seed during the cleaning process. Here at the farm, we dry most seed on coffee filters because seed does not stick to them as much when dried down. Okay, so we have put a lot of work into this crop to this point, so we don't want it to get distracted and forget what it is. This is very important. Always label your seed crop along the entire process. Plant type and species, variety, and the year the seed was grown are the basics that you want to record. Seed that is ready for storage should be hard and should snap or crunch if you try to break it. If the seed simply bends, you should continue drying it. Again, under good conditions, this should only take a couple of days. Ideally, you should store your seed in an airtight container such as this mason jar. However, envelopes such as seed packets work just fine for shorter term storage. And always store your seed in a cool, dark, and dry place. The dry being probably the most important part there. Pepper seed is only viable for about 2 years on average. Thank you again for joining the webinar. I hope it was useful, and we really appreciate all of the great comments.